You want to know the real reason? The real reason you haven't quit, the real reason you're still chasing the goal, still moving, even on the days when everything in you wants to stop. It's not because someone's watching or because of some external reward. It's because deep down, there's something hardwired inside you that knows this matters. Your nervous system, your biology. It is built for pursuit, but only if you give it something real to pursue. You don't get dopamine hits from finishing something that doesn't mean anything. You get it when your brain senses alignment between your actions and a deeper purpose. That alignment isn't motivational fluff. It's neurochemistry. It's the ventral tegmental area sending signals forward into the prefrontal cortex saying, hey, yes, this is worth it. Stay locked in. We often think we're weak when we lose motivation, but that's not true. What's usually missing isn't energy. It's clarity. You've been told to grind harder. No, what you need is precision. You need to step back and ask, why does this matter? And don't lie to yourself. Don't settle for surface-level reasons. Dig until it hurts, because the deeper you go, the more powerful your system becomes. When your why hits that deep emotional core, your brain starts wiring itself for resilience. Stress, fatigue, they're not your enemies. They are the weights your brain lifts to grow stronger. If you're aligned with your real reason, stress becomes adaptation. It literally rewires your brain. You don't break down. You build up, but only if you're honest. Only if the reason is real. And this isn't about grand gestures. This is about microscopic daily actions that reinforce your purpose. Each morning you get up and move toward it. You reinforce the circuitry that makes you who you are becoming. Your identity starts to match your vision. That's not magic, it's biology. So ask yourself without distraction, without noise, what's the real reason you're doing this? If you can look yourself in the eye and answer that with brutal honesty, you won't need someone to cheer you on. You won't need external discipline. You'll have something far stronger. Internal conviction. Internal conviction. And when that conviction is real, when it's fused into your biology, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that can stop you. The power of internal drive is often misunderstood. People tend to associate motivation with external factors, rewards, recognition, approval, or fear of failure. But true, lasting drive doesn't originate from outside. It emerges from within, from a place that's often quiet, rarely dramatic, and deeply personal. It's the voice that doesn't shout but keeps speaking when everything else goes silent. It's not dependent on applause or results. It survives failure, doubt, and pain because it isn't trying to impress anyone. Internal drive is rooted in identity, in the conviction that what you're doing matters beyond the outcome. It's a biological engine, not just a mindset. When you're driven from within, your nervous system responds differently to challenge. You don't run from stress. You move through it. You begin to associate discomfort with growth, not danger, and that changes everything. When your actions are aligned with your internal compass, your brain doesn't need to be bribed into focus, becomes naturally attuned to what you're doing. This isn't hype. It's neurochemistry, chemistry. The dopaminergic system, the part of the brain responsible for motivation, anticipation, and reward, activates not just when you receive something, but when you're working towards something meaningful. Your system begins to reinforce itself. The real power of internal drive shows up when things get hard, when there's no one watching, when the metrics flatline. External rewards can only take you so far. When those fade, so does your effort, unless there's something deeper holding it all together. That something is internal drive. It's not about inspiration, it's about alignment. Alignment between who you believe you are and what you're doing each day. When you wake up and your actions reflect your values, there's energy in that. You don't have to force discipline. It emerges because your system recognizes that this is the path. What makes internal drive sustainable is that it's self-regulating. You don't have to be pushed. You're pulled by something you believe in. You're not avoiding discomfort. You're walking straight into it because you see the purpose behind it. That's when resilience becomes natural. Your stress response adapts. Your brain begins to see adversity not as a threat, but as a signal to grow. This is where transformation happens. Not in massive breakthroughs, but in the repetition of small choices rooted in purpose. Most people chase intensity, but intensity without alignment burns out. Internal drive is slow, steady, and powerful. It doesn't always look impressive. It looks like showing up when it's boring, when it's hard, when there's no clear reward in sight. It looks like trusting that what you're building matters, even when no one else sees it. That trust, backed by biology, anchored in clarity, is what separates those who keep going from those who don't. And it can't be bought, borrowed, or faked. It has to be built, layer by layer, in silence through action that no one claps for. Stress as a catalyst is a concept that turns a common belief on its head. Most people are taught to avoid stress, to see it as something toxic or destructive, something that must be minimized at all costs. But that view is incomplete. Stress, when understood and harnessed correctly, can be one of the most powerful drivers of growth, adaptation, and long-term performance. The key is not in avoiding stress, but in learning how to engage with it intentionally, strategically, and with purpose. The brain and body are built to respond to challenge. The stress response exists not to harm us, but to prepare us, to sharpen us, and to trigger the kinds of changes that only occur when we're pushed beyond comfort. At the neurobiological level, stress initiates a cascade of responses designed to increase focus, energy, and learning. The moment a stressor is perceived, the amygdala signals the hypothalamus, activating the sympathetic nervous system. This leads to the release of adrenaline and cortisol, increasing alertness, heart rate, and blood flow to the muscles. But what happens next depends on your mindset and context. If you believe stress is a threat, the system remains reactive, inefficient, and ultimately drains you. But if you interpret stress as a signal of opportunity, a sign that you are engaging with something meaningful, your body begins to adapt, your focus sharpens, your neuroplasticity increases, your brain starts encoding new pathways for resilience. This is why controlled stress, like physical training, cold exposure, or deliberate effort in high-stakes situations, can lead to tremendous growth. When paired with recovery and purpose, stress doesn't break you down. It builds you up. It becomes a teaching signal. Stress tells the system matters. Pay attention. Grow here. That message creates lasting change, not just at the behavioral level, but at the level of the brain's wiring. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and learning, becomes more active. The prefrontal cortex, involved in decision-making and planning, becomes more engaged. In this way, stress acts as a signal for the brain to upgrade itself. What's often misunderstood is that resilience isn't the absence of stress, but the capacity to recover and grow from it. People with high stress tolerance don't avoid difficult situations. They've trained their systems to respond adaptively. They've learned how to use breath, focus, and meaning to keep the stress response in the optimal zone, not too little, not too much. They understand that the edge of challenge is where the nervous system grows. Too little stress and there's no signal for change. Too much and the system overloads. But just the right amount, consistently applied and purposefully framed, becomes the fuel for transformation. Stress, when framed correctly, reminds you that you're alive, that you're doing something that challenges your current limits. It's a form of pressure that can be used to clarify priorities, strip away distractions, and bring out a level of focus that comfort can never produce. The discomfort is real, but it's also valuable. It means you're engaged. It means you're pushing towards something that requires more than the version of you that existed yesterday. Vision and identity alignment is the foundation of lasting transformation. When who you are aligns with where you're going, everything in your system, your thoughts, your actions, your energy, moves with clarity and momentum. But when there's a gap between your vision and your identity, resistance appears. You start to sabotage your own efforts, hesitate at critical moments, and feel disconnected from your goals. That resistance isn't laziness. It's a sign that your nervous system senses a contradiction. Your vision might say, I want to be this, but your identity is still holding on to, I've always been that. The conflict between those two states creates tension, and unless it's resolved, that tension limits your ability to move forward. Your brain doesn't operate on goals alone. It operates on what it believes is consistent with your identity. If you see yourself as someone who struggles to follow through, no amount of motivational hype will override that internal narrative. But when your vision becomes embedded in your identity, when you begin to see yourself as the kind of person who does the work, who shows up, who follows through, everything shifts. The brain begins to filter your actions and decisions through that new framework. That's when habits stick. not because they're forced, but because they feel like a natural extension of who you are. This alignment creates what neuroscientists call cognitive congruence. And it's a state where your internal narrative and your external behavior support each other, reducing internal conflict and increasing motivation. When you're in this state, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and self-control, functions more effectively. You don't have to expend energy fighting yourself. You don't have to constantly justify your actions. Your system becomes more efficient because it's no longer split between two conflicting versions of you. It's unified. Vision alone isn't enough. Identity without direction leads to stagnation. But when the two meet, when the person you believe you are aligns with the future you're building, your nervous system responds with coherence. Your daily decisions carry more weight. Small actions feel meaningful. The delay between intention and action shrinks. And the reason this works is because the brain is constantly updating its model of who you are based on what you repeatedly do. Every time you act in alignment with your vision, you're not just moving toward a goal. You're training your brain to see you as that person. This is why consistency matters so much more than intensity. A single burst of effort can't reshape identity, but small, deliberate actions taken over time signal to the brain that change is real. Identity begins to shift, and with it, your capacity to hold a bigger vision increases. The future no longer feels foreign or out of reach. It feels familiar, even inevitable, because your system recognizes it as an extension of who you've already become. The path becomes clearer not because the obstacles disappear, but because you stop questioning whether you belong on it. You do, and your brain knows it. Daily micro-actions for macro change are often overlooked because they're small, quiet, and seemingly insignificant. But these small, repeated behaviors are the foundation of transformation. They are the moments that don't make headlines, the ones no one claps for, yet they are the exact building blocks of real progress. When you take consistent, intentional action, and no matter how small, your brain begins to register a pattern. It starts to connect your identity to your behavior. And over time, this pattern becomes a feedback loop that shapes how you see yourself, what you believe is possible, and what your system learns to expect. The brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly trying to anticipate what's next based on what you repeatedly do. Every micro-action is like casting a vote for the person you are becoming. The neural pathways involved in motivation, decision-making, and behavior begin to strengthen around those choices. The repetition reinforces the importance of the action. Your brain begins to say, this must matter because we keep doing it. And in response, it makes that behavior easier to repeat. This is neuroplasticity in motion, not massive rewiring through dramatic events, but steady, daily conditioning that rewires identity and behavior from the inside out. The beauty of microactions is that they bypass the resistance that comes with big, overwhelming goals. Large goals can feel distant, abstract, and heavy. They trigger doubt, perfectionism, and fear of failure. But a small action, a 2-minute cold shower, 5 minutes of focused writing, a single healthy meal choice, feels manageable. It doesn't provoke the same fear response, so the brain allows it. And once it's done, it creates a sense of momentum. That momentum fuels motivation, not the other way around. Motivation doesn't cause action. Action generates motivation, and micro-actions keep the engine running. There's also a deeper level to this. Each micro-action is a form of self-instruction. You are training your nervous system to respond differently to discomfort, to distraction, to challenge. You're not just checking boxes. You're teaching your system that effort is normal, that focus is expected, and that discipline is a default setting, not an exception. Over time, the micro becomes macro. What was once a conscious choice becomes an automatic behavior. Habits form. Identity shifts. Confidence builds, not from external praise, but from the quiet certainty that you're doing the work. And that is where true change begins. Not in the loud moments of success, but in the silent, consistent choices you make when no one is watching. These micro-actions are often invisible to others, but they are everything to your nervous system. They serve as proof. Proof that you are moving, that you are capable, that you are becoming someone new. And when you repeat them long enough, they don't just influence what you do. They reshape how you see yourself. You start to embody the change, not just chase it. You begin to feel like someone who follows through, someone who keeps promises, especially the ones you make to yourself. The truth is, transformation doesn't come from grand declarations or rare bursts of inspiration. It comes from alignment, intention, and action repeated in silence. When your vision is anchored to your identity, when stress becomes fuel instead of friction, and when every microaction is a signal of who you are becoming, change is no longer a question of if, it's only a matter of when. You are not waiting for the right moment. You are building it every single day with every choice. The real power was never out there. It's always been inside you, waiting to be directed with clarity, purpose, and relentless consistency.